In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Veni Sancte Spiritus, repletorum codifiterium et tui amoris in eis sine macende. Ebite Spiritum tuum et creabuntur.
Et renovabis faciem terrae.
Oremus. Deusque codifiterium, Sancti Spiritus illustratium jocuisti. Da nobis in eadem spiritu recta sapere, et Deus emigratione gaudere, per Christum Dominum nostrum,
Amen.
cor Maria Immaculatum,
Ora pro nobis.
Sancte Bonifatii,
Ora pro nobis.
Sancte Piedicime,
Ora pro nobis.
nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay. Let's look again at page 169, the Mass of Paul VI, facing the east, ad orientem. We're going to repeat this because of its great importance. And it shows Pope Benedict XVI was a genuine modernist. Ratzinger was a genuine, true, fanged ears, eyes, modernist. Grandma, what wonderful teeth you have.
The better to hear you, my dear.
What sharp ears you have.
Better to hear you, my dear.
What claws you have. That's what the modernists are. All right, the Mass of Paul VI facing east. In Latin, it's called what?
Ad orientem.
Yes. By the 1990s, clergy who had become disenchanted with the garden variety version of the Mass of Paul VI discovered the arguments of conservatives like Monsignor Gamber, and began promoting the idea that the second part of the new Mass should be celebrated ad orientem. That is, facing east, liturgical east, or away from the people. Some even argued that the rubrics for the new order of Mass presumed it would be celebrated ad orientem rather than versus populum, facing the people. Next paragraph. Andres?
In late 1999, the argument over whether the new Mass could or should be celebrated ad orientem was played out in a dispute between EWTN, a conservative Catholic cable network, and the Bishop of Birmingham, Alabama, from whose diocese the network televised its masses. The Congregation of Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacrament was finally asked whether versus populum celebration was made mandatory by the 2000 edition of the General Instruction. The congregation's response was that facing the people was not mandatory, but recommended.
Ratzinger and the Cosmos. Gavril?
The most prominent apologist for celebrating the Mass of Paul VI ad orientem, if not the man who inspired the movement in the first place, was Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who argued for it in a 1981 article, and then in a book published in 2000. His views on the issue have enjoyed a wide circulation ever since.
So the book is called The Spirit of the Liturgy, and then the article is Feast of Faith, Approaches to a Theology of the Liturgy. Go on.
Because Ratzinger is forever being labeled a great theological conservative, the watchdog of orthodoxy, etc. His comments on celebrating the new Mass ad orientem are viewed understandably as originating in the well springs of traditional pre-Vatican II theology. Quote, whoever prefers ad orientem always does so based on traditional Catholic doctrine. Ratzinger prefers ad orientem, therefore.
Therefore, he's a traditional Catholic theologian. Is he?
No.
Let's find out.
But this impression is entirely false. For Ratzinger, the main reason for celebrating the Mass of Paul VI ad orientem is that the practice is more cosmic. Here is his explanation.
Okay, this is right out of his mouth in this Eastward article, Joseph Ratzinger in 1986. Go ahead.
Quote, face and east, makes this cosmic dimension of the Eucharist present through liturgical gesture. Where priests and people together face the same way, what we have is a cosmic interpretation, face in the altar. It was in reality expressing a view of the Eucharistic celebration in the context of cosmos and parousia. Parousia, a tradition with strong associations in former times with the cosmic symbol of the East. Not only had the awareness of the liturgy's cosmic orientation been lost, we need to be reminded that liturgy involves the cosmos, traditionally the East, and the image of the cross, that is, the cosmic and soteriological aspects of spirituality were fused.
Yes, how's that for leaving you baffled? What in the world did he just say? Cosmos, cosmic. This is his understanding of facing east, right? In addition to ad orientem being positively cosmic, the other argument Ratzinger offers is that it brings Catholic worship into line with the liturgical so-called balance achieved by Protestants. So this is taken from the same article. Read on, please, from Cardinal Ratzinger.
Quote, our Protestant brethren, in transforming the medieval liturgical forms, have achieved a real balance between, on the one hand, the relationship of the community to its leader, and, on the other, their common relationship to the cross. Their whole basic approach laid great weight on the community character of worship and the interplay of leader and congregation, whereas in the Catholic liturgy of former times, this only consisted in the priests turning around for a brief Dominus Vobiscum, or to invite the people to pray. But when it is a question of praying together, Protestants, people and leader, together turn to the image of the crucified. I think we should seriously try to learn from this.
Learn from who?
The Protestants.
Yes, that's total modern theology. As if it was Ratzinger who said we can learn from Martin Luther. We can learn from Martin Luther's. He had a big praise for Martin Luther when he was a pope.
Maybe learn from his mistakes.
Yeah, huge scandal. Michael.
Neither argument, to be sure, has anything to with Orthodox pre-Vatican II. Neither argument, to be sure, has anything to do with Orthodox pre-Vatican II Catholic theology. And in fact, Ratzinger lifted the notion of cosmic from two modernists, Hans Urs von Balthasar and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Von Balthasar, 1905 to 1988, a
Heideggerian. He followed the philosophy of Heidegger.
A Heideggerian who said he, quote, felt like tearing down Thomistic theology with Samson's own strength, unquote, wrote two works, Cosmic Liturgy and The Glory of the Lord. Elsewhere in the same book where Ratzinger argues for the ad orientem position, he cites these two works by von Balthasar as the basis for his statement that Christian liturgy must be cosmic liturgy.
Yes, so what in the world does that mean? So notice the hatred of Thomism. I would tear down Thomas theology with Samson's own strength. Von Balthasar was a huge modernist. His works were famous among modernists, and he really condemned Archbishop Lefebvre for what he did. He's the one that said, there's no hell. And then later he said, there is a hell, but it's only for the Lefebvrists. And he died in the same year as the consecration of the bishops, 1988, after being made a cardinal by who?
John Paul II.
Yes. So, birds of a feather.
Flock together.
Yes. He should have been, under Pius XII or any good pope, he would have been banned from teaching and excommunicated for his modernism. Or at least his works condemned. Next paragraph, go on.
even worse, cosmic and cosmos are ideas that pop up throughout the works of Teilhard de Chardin, 1881 to 1954, a Jesuit evolutionist silenced by the Holy Office in 1925, and thereafter forbidden to write. Teilhard's ideas on the, quote, cosmic Christ, evolving Christ consciousness, the noosphere, the omega point of cosmic evolution, etc., enjoyed a great vogue for a while after Vatican II, and amounted to not so thinly veiled pantheism. Ratzinger has long been a promoter of this heretic, and indeed, as Benedict XVI, he has even worked Teilhard and Teilhardian terminology into his public discourses.
Yeah, footnote. Thus Benedict employed cosmos and cosmic, these words, throughout his 2009 Epiphany homily and in a 24 July 2009 Vespers homily in the Cathedral of Aosta. He spoke of the, quote, the great vision of that later Teilhard de Chardin also had. At the end we will have a true cosmic liturgy where the cosmos becomes a living host. What in the world is he talking about? That's modernism right there. And they love these they love these imprecise words. Why?
Because they can be interpreted whatever way they want, so they can, like anybody can interpret it the way they want, and just...
Yeah, it leaves a lot of room to throw in heresy, error, or partial error. While when the church, inspired by the Holy Ghost, defines, does she leave any room for any error whatsoever?
No.
Give one example of a word coined by Mother Church.
Transubstantiation.
Exactly. That's a scholastic word, and the modernists hate it. Cardinal Ratzinger himself, as a theologian, as a priest, he said, I find Thomism is a straitjacket. And it doesn't allow freedom of weird ideas like this, cosmic and cosmos, in the theology. But St. Thomas is not a straitjacket. He's, I don't know, how would you say, when you're...
He's like the vehicle that will never go off the road.
Right. If you are in a elevator, you hope that the elevator strictly obeys and stays connected on the cables, right? One snapped cable, you're dead. So St. Thomas respects reality. And that's why there's precise terms, there's precise definitions to avoid error. What's another one other than transubstantiation Mother Church has coined?
The hypostatic union.
Yes, to precisely define who Christ is. That he's hypostasis of the Son. He's the person of the Son who assumes the human nature. There's no mistaking on that. What's another one from the Council of Nicaea?
Filioque.
All right, that's the Council of Florence. Yes.
Consubstantial.
Consubstantialem Patri. Yes. These are very important Catholic terms. And the modernists, they're allergic to scholastic precision. They would make horrible mechanics. Would you fly in an airplane built by these guys?
Not built according to their principles.
There would be a lot of room for, aerodynamics. Let's not be so precise.
They would never be.
Physics. Let's not be so precise. That plane will crash.
They'd never be in business if they did that.
That's right. That's right. Yes, Bishop Williamson used to say about these modernists, and Kantian philosophers, they respect reality, they drink real coffee from a real coffee bean, they don't expect coffee to be squeezed out of an orange, they go get gas at a real gas station, they drive into a real parking lot in a real car, but then they get in the classroom and they just feed poison of unreality to the students, unhinged from reality. St. Pius X called Kantian philosophy the modern heresy. And it's rooted in this. Teilhard de Chardin was rooted in Kantian philosophy. So Father Teilhard de Chardin was poisoned. He was condemned 6 times by Pope Pius XII, his works. And as I mentioned last class, when I was looking for the seminary to go to in my high school, my bishop, who we used to serve Mass for, as boys, ride our bike and go serve his Mass. And he wore his beretta, wore his cassock, wore even the traditional vestments, but said the Novus Ordo, and we didn't know at the time. He was from Poland, but he insisted, you come to my seminary. And I said to him, well, I talked to one of your deacons, and he told me that he praised Father Teilhard de Chardin. And I asked him, wasn't he condemned by Pius XII 6 times? His works? And the deacon, out of this Bishop Stanislaus Brzana's seminary, which was Wadham's Hall in Ogdensburg, New York, which is now closed, because the deacon's response to me was, well, Father Teilhard de Chardin was ahead of his time. Meaning, Pius XII was backward, Teilhard de Chardin saw the future. And he fits perfectly with the Second Vatican Council. So, what do you do when you get a pope who is soaked in this rotten philosophy? It doesn't wash out. Is he still pope? Yes. But is his philosophy and theology all warped? Yes. And they can even think they're Catholic. And this is why it's not so easy to just say they're formal heretics. Because in their mind, Catholicism really evolves. So only God judges the interior, and we have to judge the exterior. What they say is certainly heretical and error, but to be truly formal heretics, they'd have to be tried, and they have to be proven pertinacious, that they know they're heretics. Well, they've already gone to their judgment, but they've left damage to the church and souls. Okay, where did we leave off?
Ratzinger begins.
Ratzinger begins. Take it, Andres. In his work, Spirit of the Liturgy,
Bottom paragraph.
from the year...
Ratzinger begins Spirit of the Liturgy, in which he likewise argues for the ad orientem position, with a section entitled The Essence of the Liturgy. In the 2nd chapter, Liturgy, Cosmos, History, Ratzinger approvingly draws the connection for his readers between the cosmos, Teilhard, and the Eucharist.
Quote, go ahead.
And so we can now say that the goal of worship and the goal of creation as a whole are one and the same. Divinization, a world of freedom and love. But this means that the historical makes its appearance in the cosmic. The cosmos is not a kind of closed building, a stationary container in which history may by chance take place. It is itself movement, from its one beginning to its one end. In a sense, creation is history. Teilhard de Chardin depicted the cosmos as a process of ascent, a series of unions, merged into a growing synthesis leading to the noosphere, in which spirit and its understanding embrace the whole and are blended into a kind of living organism. Teilhard looks on Christ as the energy that strives towards the noosphere and finally incorporates everything into its fullness. From here, Teilhard went on to give a new meaning to Christian worship. The transubstantiated host is the anticipation of the transformation and the divinization of matter in the Christological fullness. In his view, the Eucharist provides the movement of the cosmos with its direction. It anticipates its goal, and at the same time, it urges it on.
Now that is a classic modernist piece. There it is.
What now?
Noosphere, and they even downgrade and misinterpret transubstantiation. And like you said last time, it sounds like
It sounds like a
Nonsense.
pantheism.
pantheism.
And Christ is not a person, he's just some blob of energy. And everything's working to this omega point, according to Teilhard de Chardin. All history will converge into this omega Christ. So it's really blasphemous, really.
It's kind of romantic in a way.
It is.
A world of freedom and love.
And you can see
Yeah.
that it is mixed in with sentimentalism.
They're enamored with man.
They basically put
They're
in
in
the
love with man.
Eucharist is not looked on as God himself, it's being looked on as just this thing that helps to push it towards the
Omega point.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, so hold on, gentlemen. You're moving on a roller coaster to the omega point. All right, next one. Read on, please, Gabriel.
Such language may sound very deep to some. In fact, though it is just typical modernist bloviating, filled with vague ideas strung together in such a way to defy any logic or linear reasoning. Thus Ratzinger gives us divinizations, closed buildings, stationary containers, process of ascent, quote-unquote fullness, with quotes around it to distinguish it from just plain fullness. Growing synthesis.
Growing syntheses.
Growing syntheses.
That's the plural.
Growing on their own. Energies that strive movements of the cosmos with its direction, as opposed to without or against its direction, etc. To hear Ratzinger hold forth on cosmic and ad orientem in an EWTN interview, as I once did, is unnerving. He offers a conclusion that will appeal to Catholics of a traditional bent. Turn to the Lord, reverently face east. But the theological principles on which he bases his argument, Balthazar's and Teilhard's cosmos theology, are pure poison.
Are pure what?
Poison.
Are absolutely pure what?
Poison.
Yes, all of this has shades of the modernist Tyrrell's praise for the Latin High Mass. In either case, a correct practical conclusion should not blind one to the heresy that lurks behind it. So there's the real face of Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope Benedict. And that's where he was rooted in. That's why Archbishop Lefebvre, who dealt with him eye to eye, said this: he's a shady character, he cannot be trusted, he's not honest, and he's a snake. He's a snake in the grass. That's Archbishop Lefebvre, who dealt eye to eye with this character. And yet all the neoconservatives are, what do they say about Pope Benedict?
That he's the champion of tradition.
He brought back the Latin Mass.
He gave us
He
freedom.
saved the Latin Mass.
What do they call
Saved the Latin Mass, freed the Latin Mass.
it? The guard dog of tradition?
Yes, I mean, I can swallow the lay neocons swallowing that. But Catholic bishops of tradition, of Archbishop Lefebvre, swallowing this, like Bishop Follet, how in the world did he fall for this?
Yes, and it is shocking that when Pope Benedict XVI published the encyclical Summorum Pontificum, that Bishop Follet he ordered the Te Deum to be chanted.
Yeah, I know. And all the society chapels throughout the
Yes.
world. And many did not.
Yeah.
But do you think Archbishop Lefebvre would have praised Summorum Pontificum?
No,
Why?
because he would have seen that it was just the blasphemy in that Benedict XVI said that the new Mass and the true traditional Latin Mass, they mutually enrich each other, and they're both Catholic. The new Mass is the ordinary form, and the Trinity Mass is the extraordinary form that comes out Christmas, Easter, for special events.
That's correct. And he also said, any priest who says the Latin Mass must accept and approve the
New Mass, which the only point of saying that was because they need to accept the new theology. Because the Mass expresses the theology.
Yes.
So his whole point was to sort of like sweep them under the rug and get them standing on the false doctrines
Yes.
of that.
Yeah.
It was a real trap.
Yes, it was. And the Archbishop Lefebvre, the wise old oyster, the wise old owl, would have caught it. The new sanctuary. Read on, Guadalupe.
If the new worship was to be truly anthropocentric, the detailed old rules which govern the disposition of the sanctuary had to be scrapped, toned down, or made optional. First, there was the communion rail that separated the sanctuary of the church from the nave. It reinforced the idea that what went on at the altar was somehow holy, and that the clergy who performed the sacred rites were somehow set apart from the rest of men. The general instruction did not even mention the communion rail. The only remaining general prescription is that the sanctuary, quote, should be clearly marked off from the body of the church, either by being somewhat elevated or by its distinctive design and appointments, end quote. Like Mass facing the people, the abolition of the communion rail was sometimes presented as a return to primitive tradition. And like Mass facing the people, it was not. Father O'Connell notes that from the 4th century onwards, when Christians were first able to use permanent buildings for worship, a low metal, stone, or wood barrier separated the clergy from the people in church. From Father O'Connell's Church Building and Furnishings.
Yes. Okay, Michael.
3 important pieces of furniture most adorn the sanctuary redesigned for the new Mass: an altar, a president's chair, and a lectern. How are they to be arranged? The instructions said that the
The
congregation's
fan down
attention
in the
must be
cooler up.
drawn spontaneously to the altar. A somewhat surprising statement, since nothing happens there until the offertory. Liturgists say there are 3 centers of tension in the new Mass: altar, president's chair, and lectern. Pistoia calls this a, quote, triangular system, unquote. The U.S. Bishops' Committee of the Liturgy offered the following tip on the location of the altar. Quote, the location of the altar will be central in any Eucharistic celebration, but this does not mean that it must be spatially in the center or on a central axis. In fact, an off-centered location may be a good solution in many cases. Focus and importance in any celebration move with the movement of the rite.
Is there any way to turn that fan down?
It's like a compressor cable because it's making it colder.
Oh, it's the fan that's
The fans
it's as low as it can. It sounded lower before.
it's because of compressor cable.
Okay. Okay, so the new sanctuary. You got the altar, the table, president's chair, and the lectern. The so-called triangular system. So, the altar. So let's look at the table, really. Andres.
The practice of Mass facing the people was the most striking of the post-Vatican II innovations affecting the altar. But it was not the only one. Some were obvious. Altars that looked like butcher blocks, salad bars, meteorites, giant anvils, or copies of the Rubik's Cube. Other changes were a bit more subtle, and most went unremarked by laymen. But subtle changes are not necessarily insignificant changes, and they are worth a comment here.
A, the material. Go on.
Church law traditionally prescribed that Mass could only be offered upon an altar which was 1, of natural stone, and 2, consecrated.
That's,
They-
okay, excuse me. Code of Canon Law, 1917, number 822. By indult, priests in missionary territories could offer Mass on a Greek antimencium. That's the Greek corporal, the cloth with the relics sewn in that we carry everywhere we go on Mass circuits. That is a type of decorated corporal containing relics and blessed by an Eastern Rite bishop. So these used to be more easily available, but now they're much more difficult to obtain. So go on. So what this is saying is what is required by Catholic tradition for an altar. Very important here. So natural stone, 2, consecrated. It must be consecrated. Go on.
The altar could be fixed or movable. The fixed altar consisted of a large stone slab mounted on permanent stone supports. These were constructed in cathedrals and permanent parish churches. A movable altar consisted of a small stone slab, usually only broad and deep enough for the host, chalice, and ciborium to rest on it. In churches where a fixed altar could not be constructed, a movable altar was set into a wooden frame large enough to support all the requisites.
Yes. So by church law, the altar has to be stone. But the church permitted wooden altars, in which case there has to be the altar stone, which is about 12 inches by 10 inches and fit. And that altar stone is consecrated by the bishop. And it has 5 crosses, and the relics are cemented in with documents to show which relics. So a lot of these were rescued. In my first year, 1986, in Ridgefield at the seminary with Father Williamson at the time, one of the boys in my class was Tony Locke. He was from New Zealand. And he said that he and his father would go to the dump yard when they saw trucks leaving the local Catholic church. They would follow it, go to the dump yard, and pick up the treasures they were throwing away. And one of them was a altar stone. They rescued a few altar stones, and one of them was broken in half, and the relics were falling out. That's how much respect they had for that. So they rescued those. And anyway, we'll pick up next time. Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.